Are we ready? Shall we start? Okay, so today we'll have this topic, forearm fracture. Very important. Forearm represents a critical anatomic unit of upper limb. It permits the hand movements of all the hand functions. So either it is very important for using our hand. It maintains a stable link between elbow and wrist, and radius rotates on ulna. As you know, there are two joints, proximal and distal radio-ulnar joint, and in the middle you have interosseous membrane. And also the rotation of forearm is very important evolution among human beings. So I will explain you what are the deforming forces, how forces over forearm acts whenever any fracture of forearm occurs. Okay. So first you will see the biceps. As you all know, the insertion of biceps, you can see in the image, the insertion of biceps is in radial tuberosity of radius. So whenever any fracture occurs distal to this, biceps tends to pull this fragment towards itself. Okay. And there is supinator muscle which is inserted all over this and proximal and posterior part of radius, upper third radius. So it will try to rotate the radius whenever a fracture below it occurs. In the distal part, when you can see the pronator teres, it exerts rotation movement. Okay. And also pronator quadratus distally. So these two are angulatory forces. So isolated fracture of ulna in proximal third are angulated towards radius and are difficult to reduce. So whenever any fracture occurs in proximal ulna, they get angulated towards the radius and so are difficult to reduce. Now coming to fracture of distal radius, this is the fracture of distal radius. So whenever fracture occurs, the long forearm muscles, they tend to pull it towards them, and pronator quadratus, it tends to pull radius towards the ulnar side. Okay. So these are various deforming forces of the muscles which act on fracture fragment, and they lead to their various types of displacement. Okay. So what is the mechanism of injury for forearm fractures? So direct blow is most common. Less common is road traffic accidents, then fall with outstretched hand. Then in blast injuries and gunshot injuries, we have forearm fractures too. So we have a general classification. For descriptive purpose, we will forearm fractures can be classified into olecranon, Monteggia, Galeazzi, radial head, both bone forearm. When there is fracture of both radius and ulna, we call it both bone forearm fracture. Then fracture of distal and radius. Okay, we'll see some of the important fractures in detail. We'll see Monteggia fracture, we'll see Galeazzi fracture, and we'll focus on distal and radius. So all the important fractures we'll discuss. So Monteggia fracture dislocation, it is all called Monteggia fracture dislocation. It is not just a fracture, it also involves a dislocation. Okay. So what is this Monteggia fracture dislocation? It is named after Battista Monteggia. He was a surgeon. He was a general surgeon, Italian surgeon. So it was this fracture was named after him. it is the fracture of upper third of ulna with dislocation of radial head. So Monteggia fracture of upper third of ulna with dislocation of radial head. So caused mostly by fall on outstretched hand or direct blow on the back of the forearm. If someone gives a blow from back of the forearm, you can have Monteggia fracture. So basically you will have two types. Later on I will explain you a good classification, but for the time being, you see, we can have two types, flexion and extension. So what is this flexion type? When ulna fractures angulates posteriorly, when ulna fractures and it angulates posteriorly, and radial head also dislocates posteriorly. Both, if they go posteriorly, we call it flexion, and if both they go anteriorly, we call it extension type. Okay. So in diagnosis, there will be history of fall. We can have X-ray to confirm the diagnosis. Treatment part, very unstable fracture. If reduction is unsuccessful, a close watch is kept by weekly check X-rays for 3 to 4 weeks. But usually we go for open reduction and internal fixation. So this is a Monteggia fracture dislocation. This is ulna. Here proximal ulna fracture has occurred, and this radial head, it has dislocated. Normally this radius should lie in this line. Okay. In a normal forearm, if you draw a line through longitudinal axis of radius, okay, if you draw a line, straight line here, it will pass through capitulum, it will bisect the capitulum. Okay, but as this is fractured and the head is dislocated from its position, so if we draw a straight line here, it will go somewhere here. Okay, so this is Monteggia fracture dislocation. So this is the classification I was talking about. You can it's very simple if you try to understand. So we got here 4 types. So what happens in type 1? Ulna angulates anteriorly. This is anterior side, this is posterior side. So here the fracture, it is angulating anteriorly with anterior dislocation of radial head. This is radial head, it has dislocated anteriorly. So this is type 1. In type 2, we have posterior angulation of ulna fracture with posterior dislocation of head. Here you see this angulation is towards posterior side, and the radial head also, it has come posterior side instead of anterior side. So we call it type 2 fracture. In type 3, there is fracture of proximal ulna with lateral dislocation of radial head. This radial head has dislocated laterally, this side, it has come to, instead of sitting here, it has come this side, this is lateral side. So we call it type 3. In type 4, what happens? Fracture of proximal ulna with dislocation of radial head, and there is associated radius fracture too. In 4th type, you will have radius fracture also, apart from ulna fracture. So in 4th type, you will get ulna fracture, you will have dislocation of radial head, and you will also get one extra thing, which is radius fracture. So these are four types. We call it Badeau classification. So now comes to Galeazzi fracture dislocation. Okay, Galeazzi, it is also based upon name of a surgeon. He was Riccardo Galeazzi. Okay, so it is a counterpart of Monteggia fracture dislocation. What happens here? It is the fracture of lower third of radius with dislocation of distal radioulnar joint. Okay, in Galeazzi fracture, you will have lower third radius fracture with dislocation of DRUJ. We call it distal radioulnar joint. Fall on outstretched hand, there will be history. Okay, so you will have history of fall. You can do x-ray to confirm diagnosis. Now in the treatment part, you will have you need to reduce the fracture properly. Okay, why it is important? Because without operation this fracture is very difficult to reduce. So it is sometimes this fracture is often called fracture of necessity because it necessitates a surgical intervention. So it is difficult to reduce it in a conservative way, so we almost every time go for operative procedures. So this Galeazzi fracture is called fracture of necessity. Surgery with plating, when we reduce the fracture, this DRUJ will fall back into its own place. So here also we got two types Galeazzi fracture. Volar type, when the dislocation it goes below, when the ulnar head it goes towards the volar side. In here you remember we are classifying this not in terms of this fracture fragment, but we are, because if you will see this fracture fragment has gone up, means it has gone towards volar dorsal side, but we are calling it volar because we will see this ulnar head and then we will decide what type it is. So when the ulnar head comes down, we call it volar. Here the ulnar head has gone up towards the dorsal side, so we call dorsal type of Galeazzi fracture dislocation. So in general, forearm fractures, we have three mode of treatment. Any fracture, whether it be Monteggia, Galeazzi, whether it is both bone forearm, shaft, distal radial fracture, we will deal it differently. Apart from that, all other fractures we can have all these three modalities of treatment. First we'll try non-operative or conservative treatment. So what are the demerits in this non-operative there is no control of fracture fragments, there is high rate of secondary displacement, uncertain time to union, and poor functional results. Closed methods, they don't have very much functional results as we will apply the cast for around 6 weeks. So there is restriction of joint movements after we remove the plasters. So second option is intramedullary nailing. We have radius and ulna nails, specialized nail, thin nails come for that. They are somewhat square in cross section. Okay, we do nailing in shaft forearm fractures. So what are demerits of this intramedullary nailing? Here also we are not having any control over the fracture fragments. Okay, anatomical realignment is difficult and more difficult to explore neurovascular cells. In nailing, like if we do ulnar nailing, we put an entry point from our elbow. From this olecranon process, we do ulnar nailing. We push a nail from here to here. So we are not opening the fracture site. So if there any neurovascular compromise, we won't have the chance to clear that. And for radius we put nail from here, from the distal part of the radius we put the nail. For ulna we put it from proximal side, for radius we push from distal side. So here also there are chances of non-union are very high if we do nailing. So ideal or gold standard, what we say, plate osteosynthesis or open reduction internal fixation with plates. So they have excellent control of fracture fragments, perfect realignment is possible. Other concomitant injuries like any nerve or vascular injury can be treated simultaneously. There is very low rate of non-union. There is excellent functional results. Okay, so these are merits and demerits of all the three modalities of treatment. So what are the complications of forearm fractures. There may be infection, there may be compartment syndrome, malunion, synostosis or cross union. As I had said you before while teaching non-union, in both bone forearm fractures, cross union is very common. There is non-union, nerves and vessel injury. Okay, so these are few complications which result from both bone fractures. So this is something mnemonic for you. If you may often get confused with Monteggia and Galeazzi fracture, so you can read this slide. MU for Monteggia, M for Monteggia, U for ulna, Galeazzi GER, okay, Z for distal, R for radius. So you can remember this picture and so that you won't confuse. So now coming to distal and radius fracture. Distal and radial fractures occur through distal metaphysis of radius. Okay, it may involve the articular surface or it may also involve styloid process of ulna. So radial fracture, it may also involve ulnar styloid process. Most commonly results from fallen outstretched hand. Fractures of distal end of radius represent almost 16% of the fractures treated by orthopedic surgeons. So there are three main peaks of the fracture: children about 5 to 14 years, males under 40 years, and females over 40 years of age. Okay. In elderly, you find mostly extra-articular fractures, but in young, you most commonly find intra-articular fractures. Most common risk factors are decreased bone mineral density, female gender, and early menopause. Okay. So I will just refresh you some relevant anatomy for this distal and radius. It is very important for your exam and for your practical everything. So the epiphysis of distal end of radius usually appears at 1 year of age. It grows more lateral than medial direction and forms radial styloid process. Okay, you all know what is radial styloid process. Just over the distally it extends and forms a conical type structure. It called styloid process. It has 5 facets and 3 articular surface. 3 articular surface, you know, scaphoid, lunate, and sigmoid notch. So scaphoid is first, as you know, you might be remembering the mnemonic you had during your first year MBBS. C looks too pretty, try to catch her. So C, S was for scaphoid, L was for lunate. Okay, so first and second bone are carpal bones are scaphoid and lunate. So these two bones, they articulate with radius, and this sigmoid notch is present in radius for the articulation of ulna. Okay, so surfaces you all know: distal, volar, dorsal, medial, and lateral. The distal articular facet is triangular in shape and covered completely by hyaline cartilage and has 2 specific areas: the scaphoid and lunate fossa. Okay, which articulate with carpal by scaphoid and lunate bone respectively. I will show you this diagram so you will be more clear. This is the dorsal surface. So this is the fossa for scaphoid. This scaphoid articulates here. This is fossa for lunate, and this is sigmoid notch. This is for the articulation of distal ulna. This is on the dorsal aspect. Can somebody say what is this? What is this structure called? This elevation over the dorsal part of your wrist. You may feel it sometimes. What do you call it? This structure over radius. Any idea? So this is Lister's tubercle. Okay, it is present. It is a bony ridge over dorsal aspect of distal radius. So the anterior aspect of distal radius is smooth, Okay, this anterior or the volar aspect is smooth and concave except at the insertion of pronator quadratus. The posterior aspect is narrower than anterior and most prominent V-shaped crest called Lister's tubercle. The medial aspect of distal radius is triangular and presents an articular facet. We call it sigmoid notch. The origin of TFCC attaches to the distal border of sigmoid fossa. Okay. TFCC is triangular fibrocartilage complex. So what is the pathomechanics for injury of distal end of radius? Injury depends on the position of wrist, the magnitude and direction of the force and physical properties of the bone. So these are all the factors which determine what type of fracture will occur. So a fallen outstretched hand, invariably all the fractures of forearm you are having fallen outstretched hand. With wrist at 40 to 90 degree of dorsiflexion produces a distal radius fracture with dorsal displacement. The lunate can exert a compressive force on distal radius producing a so-called die punch fracture. We call it die punch. If lunate will exert pressure over the radius articular surface, we get a fracture which we call die punch fracture. Ulnar stelloid fracture component of Colles fracture results from a force transmitted through an intact triangular fibrocartilage complex. Okay. So fracture of distal radius with palmar displacement are attributed to more than one mechanism. There may be fall on back of the flexed hand or fall on outstretched extended hand. Radial styloid fracture result from avulsion force generated through palmar radiocarpal ligament. We should also evaluate for other fracture. So these were just to refresh some of the relevant anatomy and pathomechanics, how fracture over distal end of radius occurs, just to give you an overall idea how this fracture happens. So now coming to most important radiological assessment. So first, whenever a fracture occurs, we do is X-ray. So three types of views you can have. You can have AP view, you can have lateral view, and you can have oblique view. So now you will be coming across few terms. I will explain you what are those: radial height, radial inclination, ulnar variance, and volar tilt. So these are new terms for you. I will explain you what are those. So first, coming to radial height. I will explain the term, then I will tell you what importance they have. So what is radial height? Distance between two parallel lines drawn perpendicular to the long axis of radial shaft. Okay, these two lines perpendicular to long axis of radius. And where do we draw these two lines? One from tip of radial styloid. This is the radial styloid. From tip of radial styloid, this, and other from the ulnar corner of lunate fossa. So this is scaphoid fossa. Lunate fossa is somewhere here. Okay. So from lunate fossa we will draw a transverse line, and from tip of radial styloid we will draw a line. So this distance what we get, we call it radial height. Okay. So this is normally it is 12 mm. So acceptable loss of height with fracture is 3 mm in young and 5 mm in elderly population. So this is its importance. We can have acceptable reduction if there is loss of 3 mm. We can compare this from the side which is normal for any patient. So there we will see what is radial height, and in the fracture part, if we have done any conservative management and reduced the fracture, then you will measure what is the radial height, whether if it is within 3 mm to 5 mm, we can take that acceptable, but if it's more than that, then we can say that we have inadequate reduction. Now coming to radial tilt or inclination. What is this radial tilt or inclination? Angle between two two lines, one drawn perpendicular to the long axis of radius. Here we are drawing a long axis of radius. This is one line we are drawing perpendicular to it. Okay, so the long axis of radius at the ulnar corner of lunate fossa and another between tip of radial styloid. So this is tip of radial styloid and this is same lunate fossa. So we are drawing a straight line joining these two lines. Okay, so the angle which is formed by this perpendicular and this line joining two points, we call it radial angulation. This is somewhat radius is angulated from outer to inner side. This is angulated. It is not a straight line, the distal part of radius. It is somewhere angulated like this. So this is the angle of inclination. Normal value is 23 degree. Now coming to ulnar variance. What is this ulnar variance? The third picture you can see. So it is the relative lengths of distal articular surface of radius and ulna at the wrist. So difference between articular surface of radius and ulna. So two lines you will draw, one at the level of lunate fossa here and other at the level of this ulnar head or the distal ulnar articular surface. So this difference which we get, this height or this distance which we get, we call it ulnar variance. The difference, variance means difference. So it is a difference between radial articular surface and ulnar articular surface. So normal values 0 to we can have 2 mm. Now last one we are coming is volar tilt or palmar tilt. From lateral view, if you will see the radius is slightly bent towards inside, towards ventral side. This is ventral side, this is dorsal side. So it is not straight like this, it is bent slightly. So what is palmar tilt? The angle between two lines, one drawn perpendicular to this is long axis and we have drawn a perpendicular, and another between dorsal and palmar lips of distal radial articular structure. Very simple. This is the dorsal tip of articular surface, this is ventral tip. So you join this line, and with this right angle, the angle which you form, we called palmar tilt. It is usually 11 to 12 degree. Okay, so these are four. You can see in X-ray: ulnar variance, dorsal tilt, radial inclination, radial height. So you can appreciate better because these are radiological assessment. So what are the importance of these radiographic parameters? So a radial height, normal 13 mm. So acceptable criteria, till there is 5 mm shortening we can accept this. If it is more than that, it is not acceptable. Radial inclination, normal is 23 degree. So a change within 5 degree is accepted. If more than 5 degree, it is not accepted. So we'll plan some other thing for that fracture. Articular step off, if there is difference between in articular surface, there has been an articular fracture. If there is 2 mm more than step off, 2 mm up and down for the articular surface, will have unacceptable, will not accept that. And the volar tilt, normal is 11 degree. So if there is dorsal angulation less than 5 degree or within 20 degree of contralateral distal radius. So these are some of the things you may find it difficult to remember. So just remember what are the radiological parameters, all those 4 parameters. What are those? It is very simple, you can remember what are those, and their normal value. Okay, so classification of distal end of radius. So by name, if you call, there are some special type of fracture. We'll see later what are those: Colles fracture, Smith's fracture, Barton's fracture, Schoffer's fracture. Okay, So universal classification of distal and radius is, you can broadly divide them into four types. Type 1, extra-articular undisplaced, when the fracture has not extended to the joint or the articular surface, we called it extra-articular. Type 1, and it is undisplaced. In type 2 you get extra-articular displaced. In type 3 you get intra-articular. There it has involved the articular surface, but it is undisplaced. Whereas in fourth type you will get intra-articular and displaced. So these are those Colles fracture. This is distal end of radius fracture, and this distal fragment, it is going towards dorsal side. Similarly, in Smith fracture we will have distal and radius fracture, but this fracture fragment will go to volar side, ventral side. So these two are opposite of each other. In one the fracture fragment goes dorsal aspect, in one it goes ventral aspect. This is Barton fracture. It is articular fracture. As you can see, it has gone towards the articular surface. This is Hutchinson fracture. It is the fracture of radial styloid fracture. Okay, so there is other classification known as Frickman classification. Just try to understand, then you will remember it better. Otherwise, if you try to mug up, it will be very difficult for you to just mug it up. So type 1, you will have 8 types here. Okay, Frickman, 8 types. You can remember from name, you have 8 letters here in Frickman, so you will have 8 varieties here. What happens in type 1? Extra-articular radial fracture. Okay, this is extra-articular radius fracture, very simple. Type 1. Type 2, extra-articular radial fracture with ulna fracture. This is extra-articular with ulna fracture. Okay. Type 3, you have intra-articular fracture without ulna fracture. Here the fracture has extended to articular surface, so intra-articular fracture. In type 4, intra-articular fracture with ulnar strut. Just you divide this into two columns, 1, 3, 5 and 7. 2, 4, 6 and 8. All the even type will have ulna fracture in addition to this. So you will have to remember just this 4 type. When you add ulna fracture to it, ulnar styloid process fracture to it, 1 becomes 2, 3 becomes 4, 5 becomes 6, 7 becomes 8. Okay. So in type 3 you got intra-articular, and type 4 intra-articular with ulnar styloid. In type 5 you will have fracture of radio-ulnar joint. This is radio-ulnar joint. So the fracture is coming to this radio-ulnar joint. In type 1 and type 2 this fracture was above this radio-ulnar joint. This is the distal radio-ulnar joint. In type 1 and type 3 you had fracture above it. But now in type 5 what happens? This fracture line straight comes to the radio-ulnar joint. And in type 6 as usual you will have ulnar styloid process. In type 7 what happens? Intra-articular fracture with radiocarpal and radio-ulnar joint. Means here you will have intra-articular towards this, and you will have radio-ulnar joint involvement also. Understood? Very simple. First you are getting extra-articular, third you are getting intra-articular, fifth you are getting towards the radio-ulnar joint, sixth you are having intra-articular as well as this is radio-ulnar as well as radio-carpal joint involvement. Okay, so this is Frickman classification. You have 8 types here. So here you can see one more diagram. Type 1, this is fracture. Type 2, if this ulnar fracture occurs. Type 3, here it has gone to articular surface. Type 4, if there is also styloid fracture. Type 5, here you see it has came to radio-ulnar joint. And type 6 you will have ulnar fracture. Type 7, You will have here also radio ulnar joint. You will have here also radio carpal joint, and in 8 you will have ulnar styloid process. I hope this classification is clear to you. So what are the complications of distal and radius fracture? So there may be disruption of TFCC, the scapulohumeral and lunotriquetral interosseous ligament injuries, ulnar nerve injuries, carpal tunnel syndrome, post-traumatic radiocarpal osteoarthritis, heterotropic ossification, reflex sympathetic dystrophy, tendon rupture, or complex regional pain syndrome. So treatment for distal and radius fracture, always we'll first try closed reduction. So in closed reduction we reduce. How we do closed reduction, I will explain you later what is the technique and how you do closed reduction. And then we apply plaster. Below elbow plaster we apply just below the elbow, and it extends to this palmar crease, distal palmar crease. Up to here we'll put a below elbow cast for 6 weeks. If we are not getting adequate reduction from closed reduction, we will go for surgical treatment. Okay. So when a surgery is indicated, when the reduction is not acceptable, when radius shortening is greater than 5 mm, radial inclination less than 10 degree, tilt on lateral projection is greater than 10 degree dorsal tilt and greater than 20 degree volar tilt, intra-articular step off of 2 mm, article incongruity 2 mm, or if you want to remember you can remember this, but it's not necessary you have to remember this. Okay. So surgical treatment, we have benefit, there is less stiffness, greater function is possible. Okay, immediate mobilization of the joint, so there are some benefits of surgical treatment. So all those treatment modalities for distal and radius I will discuss later after completing one very important fracture, that is Colles fracture. We'll study in detail, then I will say you how we do treatment. So types of distal and radius fracture: Colles fracture, Smith fracture, forearm fracture, styloid fracture, Barton fracture, comminuted intra-articular fracture. So number one is Colles fracture. It is the fracture in the distal end of radius at corticocancellous junction. So distal, it is usually about 2 cm from articular surface, distal articular surface, the place where cortex and cancellous region they join. Okay, we have fracture there, we call it Colles fracture. With fracture of radius there is almost always dislocation of inferior radioulnar joint. Most common age group above 40 years and occurring most commonly in women, post-menopausal women. Okay. Mechanism of injury: fall on outstretched hand. As second is Smith fracture. As I have told you earlier, it is reverse of Colles fracture. In Colles fracture, this distal fragment it goes towards dorsal side, but in Smith fracture, this fracture comes to ventral side. Okay. So here is a deformity you find in Smith fracture is garden spade deformity, whereas in I will say you in Colles fracture we find a deformity called dinner fork deformity, but in Smith fracture we find a deformity called garden spade deformity. You will be often asked in your pre-PG exams, garden spade deformity or dinner fork deformity, which type of fracture you find. So just remember, in Colles fracture you find dinner fork deformity, whereas in Smith fracture you find garden spade deformity. So you can do X-ray to confirm it. Treatment is conservative, mostly closed reduction with cast for 6 weeks, or we can do K-wire or plate. Now third fracture is Barton fracture. It is intra-articular fracture. I had shown you previously also the image. So when the articular surface is involved, it has got two parts, volar Barton. When the volar side fracture fragment is involved, we call it volar. If this fragment is on the dorsal side, we call it dorsal Barton. So there is two types, volar Barton or dorsal Barton type of Barton fracture. Die punch fracture, I had said you earlier, Schoffer's or Hutchinson's fracture. It is the fracture of radial styloid process. Okay. So now we will discuss. I'll give you 5 minutes break, then we will study this Colles fracture in detail. Okay. Let's say 2 minutes. If you have any doubt till now, you can ask. We can refresh it once again if you want. If anyone you are having doubt till now, forearm fractures, Monteggia fracture, Galeazzi fracture, distal end radius fracture. No doubts? Okay, what all books you have bought or something? Have you got chance to buy any orthopedics book? There was lockdown or something. You have bought any book for orthopedics? Okay, Maheshwari. What else? One book from Maheshwari is sufficient for MBBS level. Also, you can have one more book, Aplay's book for orthopedics. If someone wants to learn extra, you can have that book. Apleys, Aplay's. So we'll move to our next topic, Colles fracture. It was first described by Abraham Colles. He was a renowned professor of anatomy, surgery and physiology. All the three subjects he was professor in Royal College of Ireland. So he was a very dignified person. So he described this fracture first and named after his name. It is Colles fracture. So it is most common fracture in elderly, usually in older women. If you will be asked most common fracture in post-menopausal women or older women, you call it Colles fracture. It is the transverse fracture of distal end of radius at cortico-cancellous junction with dorsal displacement of distal fragment. As I have shown you previously also, fracture at cortico-cancellous junction with dorsal displacement of distal fragment. So what is the relevant anatomy? You can see just it articulates with carpal bones and ulna, articulates with radius, it ventrally and medially. Tip of styloid process is 1 centimeter distal to the tip of ulnar styloid. So this tip of radial styloid and this tip of ulnar styloid process, it is 1 centimeter radial styloid is more below. So mechanism of injury, history of fall on outstretched hand. Okay, this is somewhere a outstretched hand with force is applied in the length of forearm at the wrist in extension. This force comes here and fracture occurs here transversely at corticocancellous junction. Now there are 6 type of displacement in Colles fracture. Okay, you have to remember this. What are the 6 type of displacement? One is dorsal displacement. If the fracture fragment it shifts dorsally, we call it dorsal displacement. Second is dorsal tilt. If it gets tilted towards the dorsal side, we call it dorsal tilt. So in this figure you are having both dorsal displacement as well as dorsal tilt. Now third is lateral displacement or radial displacement. So this fracture fragment is going more towards radial side or lateral side, so we call it lateral displacement. If there will be tilt, we call it lateral tilt. There will be two more movements, that displacement we call it supination and impaction of fragment. If the fracture fragment gets impacted over one another, you have learned in general orthopedics what was impaction. So the impaction of fragments can occur, and supination, if the fracture fragment it's somewhat supinates, we will have supination movement. So these 6 type of displacement you will find in Colles fracture. You have to remember this, it's very important. So what can be other associated injuries in Colles fracture? There may be fracture of styloid process of ulna, there may be rupture of ulnar collateral ligament, there may be TFCC rupture, there may be rupture of introsus or radioulnar ligament causing radioulnar subluxation. So these are associated injuries which can happen. So what are the clinical features of Colles fracture? As you all know, pain is first and foremost thing, and it is very important thing. There will be swelling, there will be deformity. Classic deformity will be Dana-Fogg deformity, as I said you. Radial styloid comes at the level of ulnar styloid. Usually we saw, I said you that radial styloid process is 1 centimeter more away at the level than the ulnar styloid process. So this is how a Dana-Fogg deformity will look. It just looks like a dinner fork. Okay. So now for diagnosis you will do X-ray. So you will find there will be fracture of distal end of radius. In lateral view you can see these two displacement. Okay. Just imagine lateral view. If you are seeing a wrist from this side, obviously we can say whether the movement is dorsal side. Okay, in this plane. We can't say from lateral view whether there is medial or lateral displacement. We can only say the dorsal displacement. But if we see from AP view, if we see like this, we can say the fracture has moved laterally. Okay. So this is what we see. From AP view you can see the radial tilt and lateral displacement, and in lateral view you can see the dorsal displacement. If same fracture, this fracture fragment it comes here, it comes to volar side, we call it Smith fracture. So this is how a Dana-Fogg deformity is produced. It will give a figure of a Dana-Fogg. So what are the treatment for Colles fracture? So first, if the fracture is undisplaced, we'll obviously do cast application for 6 weeks. Okay. If the fracture is displaced, we'll try to reduce this manually. We'll do closed reduction followed by immobilization with Colles cast. This is a special type of cast we apply in Colles fracture. And third is, if there is comminuted fracture, we have 3 options here. We have to do operative. These all 3 are operative interventions. We can either put K wires, then apply plaster. We can either put external fixator if there is open wound or compound wound something. we can put external fixator, then we can have locking or compression plates. So these three are the operative options we have got if the fracture is not reducible. So how you will do close reduction and manipulation? You can do in general or regional anesthesia. So there will be shaking hand position, how you shake your hand. Okay, now you will have three steps to reduce. First step is to impact the fragments. So this can be achieved by longitudinal traction. So first we pull the fracture. Your assistant will hold the forearm or the elbow, then you will give a pull to from this hand. By holding this hand, you will give a pull. In step 2, what you will do, you will press the distal fragment into palmar flexion. Okay, as the distal fragment has gone dorsally, so we'll try to bring it down towards the palmar side. So we press the distal fragment into palmar flexion. We do like this. We continue giving traction, then we do palmar flexion like this, and ulnar deviation by using thumb of other, and we deviate towards ulnar side, towards this side. So palmar flexion, then ulnar deviation. Okay, now the hand is drawn in pronation. We do hand in pronation and we apply cast like this. Okay, like this, like this. So these are three steps. First you disinfect the fragment by pulling it, giving it a longitudinal traction. Then you press the fragment, do palmar flexion, ulnar deviation, then you keep in pronation. Plaster cast is applied extending from below the elbow, up to metacarpal heads, or you can say up to this distal palmar crease. You can apply plaster. You can spare the thumb. After 6 weeks, you remove the plaster and you start mobilizing the joints. So this is how you will do. First, it is giving longitudinal traction, then they are pushing it downward. They are making the wrist in palmar flexion position. Okay, and they are also doing ulnar deviation. So this basic step, this is somewhat a Colles cast will look. Palmar flexion, ulnar deviation. This is palmar flexion, this is ulnar deviation. So this is how you will put a Colles cast. So that was conservative method number. In first operative, you will have percutaneous K-wire fixation. When the fracture is not held by simple manipulation, we put two K-wires. From here we put one, and from here cross K-wires we put. Okay. External fixator, if there is compound wound or there is collapse of fracture fragments, we need to distract it. We apply external fixator. There is a special type of external fixator. We call it JESS fixator, JESS, Jossy's external stabilizing system. So it has a mechanism by which we can pull the fracture fragment more apart. Suppose there is impaction of fracture fragments, they have collapsed into one another, we have to maintain the height, so we'll give a distraction force. That force can be given by an instrument called JESS fixator. So now coming to third operative option is internal fixation. We apply a plate here. This is T plate or distal radius plate. We apply here. If it is in Colles fracture, we have dorsal displacement, so we apply dorsal plate. Whereas in Smith fracture, there is ventral displacement of fracture, so we can apply ventral plates. So what are the complications of Colles fracture? There may be stiffness, malunion, subluxation of inferior radial ulnar joint, carpal tunnel syndrome, Sudeck's osteodystrophy, rupture of external pollicis longus tendon. So these are the complications. Most frequently you get malunited Colles fracture. If properly it is not reduced, we get malunion. So malunion is very common. That's all about your forearm fractures. You can have these two books. Maheshwari is well and good. If you want to read extra, you will have Applay's System of Orthopedics. You can buy that. These two are of course postgraduate books, very voluminous books. You need not buy them. So any doubt up to now? We have completed our upper limb. We have completed shoulder. We have completed humerus. We have completed forearm and radius. Other small fractures of phalanx and metacarpals we won't be teaching. Okay. Next we'll move towards either lower limb, or we can start tumor. And you may have your assessment next week or following next week. We'll let you know. I'll inform your CR few days earlier, but I am saying it from today itself that you can have either next Friday or next to next Friday. Okay, so you must be prepared according to that. Thank you.